Bats. Their unique abilities have helped them conquer almost every continent on Earth. They've adapted and thrived for more than 60 million years. But now, bats in North America are dying by the millions, an unprecedented wildlife disaster. If the tide of death continues, entire ecosystems may change dramatically. In 2006, a package arrives at Cornell University, addressed to pathologist Dr. Beth Buckles. Inside, a small dead bat, messenger from a formerly thriving colony near Albany, New York. Seemingly overnight, thousands of bats had suddenly perished.
We started what we call just our general disease investigation. We did find a pneumonia in the first batch of bats, which turns out just seems to be something that bats get, but the fungus was new.
The bat has a mysterious fungus on its wings and mouth that would come to be known as white nose syndrome. Within a year, 12 more colonies in New York and Vermont are wiped out. The killer is spreading fast. In eastern Pennsylvania, Dr. DeeAnn Reeder monitors the events in New York with alarm, and then the renowned bat biologist gets to work.
We were, at that time, ahead of the storm, if you will. And so, unlike those folks in New York, New Hampshire, Vermont, who were scrambling, who were struggling to understand where this disease was, what was happening to their bats, we didn't have it yet. And it gave us one full winter to get ready.
DeeAnn and her team had been studying bat immune systems and hibernation patterns for years, a field of research now under critical time pressure.
In many ways, we don't know a lot about bat behavior and physiology. They're still largely a mystery. And overnight, this basic science that we were doing became critically important. And it was the week before Christmas. I had a couple of phone calls. One was from Greg Turner of the Pennsylvania Game Commission, who I knew just a little bit. We hadn't really worked much before. And he said, I hate to bother you on a Saturday, but it's here.
DeeAnn and Greg head out to a bat colony in western Pennsylvania. En route, they encounter early signs of trouble. Bats flying in broad daylight, an astonishing sight.
Boy, that one just looks like it's flying erratically, too.
Most bats are never active during the day. Their bodies can't handle it. If the dark, naked skin of their wings absorbs too much sunlight, the bats will overheat quickly. They are, by definition, creatures of the night. Something is amiss. Soon, DeeAnn and Greg find the next sign of trouble. A group of bats had clustered at the entrance of an abandoned mine and died there. Some of these bats were old acquaintances.
Little brown. That's a female. And there's a band on here. It's PAGC. 5500.
It's just really sad, you know, and you go back and you look on your records and you say, wow, I trapped this bat on the other side of the state 2 years ago at a maternity colony, and she was doing just fine. That's big.
Greg and DeeAnn decide to check on the colony.
The hardest thing is actually you're going to these sites as the manager and counting these bats and protecting them, and you count 5,000 one year, and the next year, 8,000 and 12,000, and you're watching that population grow, and you're seeing these big clusters of bats in the same spot every year, and then you go back and there's nothing there, and it's like a ghost town.
Last winter, nearly 20,000 bats hibernated here. In just 1 year, the entire colony has been wiped out. But finally, deep inside the mine, they find some survivors. These few hibernating bats are all that remain of last year's thriving colony, but they're not doing well.
I turn and I look and I see that these bats are, covered in stuff. It was really clear. One of the first things you see are these white plugs right in the nostrils.
The fungus has completely penetrated the colony.
I think this one is more than I've ever seen.
No, never seen anything like this.
The surviving bats are emaciated and their wings brittle.
You get into these sites and you see the bats that haven't yet died, but you know that they're going to. And so that's really challenging.
Once awake, the bats try to clean the fungus off their wings. In vain. They can't be saved. The mysterious white fungus found on every dead bat is eventually identified and named Geomyces destructans. Little is known about this new species, only that it grows in cold conditions. No one knows where it came from, how it's spreading so quickly, or how it's actually killing the bats. Until DeeAnn and researchers around the country figure this out, they won't be able to stop the destruction.
I think that we're not going to lose one species of hibernating bat. I think we're going to potentially lose many species of hibernating bats. So it goes from, wow, here's this one really interesting species that may go extinct, and that's very tragic, to here's an entire guild of animals. So all of these animals that have the same job, that play the same role in the environment, multiple species that have this same role, these hibernating insectivorous bats, could potentially go extinct. Then you're looking at something on a giant scale.
From New York, the disease spreads in all directions, wiping out over 6 million bats by 2012. The question is, how high the toll will become once the epidemic hits the great colonies in the South. Nearly 2,000 miles from the original cave in Albany, New York, Dr. Nickolay Hristov and Dr. Louise Allen returned to Central Texas for their 8th field session.
Sometimes, when you first walk up here, you don't know, is the colony still here? If the cave's not breathing out, you don't smell them. And if you cup your ears and listen for a little bit, you can hear them.
Nick and Louise have been striving to understand these giant colonies for years with high-speed cameras that help make the invisible visible. Their first step? Update a population census and find out how many bats are actually at stake.
There are about a dozen or so large known caves, each of which could be 500,000 to a couple million bats. So you can imagine the effect of one of these being affected in the same number and percentages as the northeastern populations.
Every night, more than 500,000 Mexican free-tailed bats pour out of this single cave to feed. After the bats have emerged, Nick and Louise can enter the cave, but only after they've taken necessary precautions. Without respirators, the cave's fumes would kill them within minutes. More than 12 feet of bat guano, several centuries worth of accumulated feces, covers the floor of the cave. It supports an army of critters and produces lethal levels of ammonia in the air. Yet overhead, young bat pups cling to the ceiling. Weak and naked, they remain behind with just a few caretakers while the rest of the colony goes out hunting. When the mothers return from feeding, each finds her own pup among hundreds of thousands and nurses it. Here, among fumes too toxic for humans, hundreds of thousands of bats are born and raised each year. White nose syndrome could be devastating here, but so far the temperature in the cave is too high for the cold-loving fungus to grow, as long as it doesn't mutate. At dawn, the bats return. Descending from heights of up to 10,000 feet, they may have traveled as far as 100 miles. These achievements are not merely impressive, they're also of great benefit to us. What we consider agricultural pests, bats around the country consider dinner. Bats are the only nocturnal flying predator that hunt for insects, and over millions of years, they've perfected their abilities. Ray King has been farming this country for more than 35 years and appreciates the help he receives each night.
You know, people just kind of take things for granted, but as time went on, I became more aware of bats. You know, I don't know what we do without them. They're part of of our whole system. You know, they was put here to, for a reason, and they consume a lot of insects in one night,
Bats can eat up to about 110% of her own body weight every night in insects. That's me having 500 McDonald's Quarter Pounders every night. Right? That's an enormous amount of food.
Because millions of bats in the north have died, billions of tons of insects are no longer being eaten. No one knows what kind of impact this will have on agriculture and the overall ecosystem. In Pennsylvania and across the Northeast, bats continue to die. DeeAnn returns to the front lines of the epidemic, an abandoned U.S. steel mine, to search for clues about how the fungus kills. Today, she's hoping for a closer look at the hibernation behavior of infected bats. Healthy bats wake themselves from hibernation at the slightest sign of a threat, a noise, a smell, some light. But DeeAnn suspects the fungus may have changed that response. The sick bats don't respond to DeeAnn's presence. Even a strong stimulus, like stroking, doesn't rouse a bat from torpor. After more than 20 minutes, the sick bat finally begins to warm up. Something is seriously off. The bats are also seriously emaciated and seem to be starving. DeeAnn needs to take a closer look at their condition. At her lab, she runs more controlled experiments, beginning with a little temperature sensor glued onto the bat.
One of the things that we're trying to do here is to figure out how you go from a skin infection to strange behavior in hibernation that results in starvation.
The bats are placed in climate chambers. Here, DeeAnn can control humidity and temperature. After a few minutes at 7 degrees Celsius, the bats enter hibernation. By reducing their heartbeat and almost all other bodily functions, they stretch time and can survive for 5 months without eating. Infrared cameras inside the chambers record the bats' every movement.
Every mammal hibernator periodically warms up or arouses from that torpor and may stay warm for an hour and a half or so and then goes cold again. Those arousals are really important physiologically. They might drink in that time. They're kind of getting everything re-regulated that stopped working very well because they were cold. They're sort of rebooting, if you will. Those arousals, even though they're very important, they cost a lot in terms of energy.
When DeeAnn and her team look at the data from the temperature sensors, they make an astonishing discovery.
These white-nosed bats have changed that thermoregulation changed how they're hibernating, what those patterns are, in such a way that they are arousing too frequently, and that is going to literally cause them to starve to death.
Bats with white nose syndrome are rousing more than twice as often as healthy bats. They're burning through their fat reserves much too fast. This is why the bats in the U.S. steel mine didn't respond to threats. They were close to starvation. DeeAnn has solved a piece of the puzzle, but many questions remain.
Sometimes in science you can get a little cocky and you think you know a lot. And you think that, you really understand something. And then something comes along, like white nose syndrome, and you realize you don't know anything. And you realize that you need to reach out to lots of other people to help you work through particular problems, that you're only an expert in one little area. And it's frustrating. I want to be able to solve this. And it's not that easy.
At the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History, the curator in charge of mammals, Dr. Christopher Helgen, has been keeping a close eye on the epidemic.
What scares me about white nose syndrome is how little we know about it. Does it have a longer history in North America? Does it have a history on other continents? Is it associated with other environments and species? We have no idea.
DeeAnn Reeder has been a Smithsonian Research Associate for years. Her ongoing donation of infected and healthy specimens is helping to build a key scientific resource.
Smithsonian has the largest natural history collection in the world, and the mammal collection is the largest in the world, and the bat collection, I believe, is the largest bat collection in the world. It's about 140,000 specimens of bats, representing not every, but most species that are known to science worldwide. Each of those specimens takes you to a particular time and a particular place. If we want to know something about what species was living in a particular forest at a particular time point, we can't get in a time machine and go back there and look. But in a way, we can, and the reason is specimens were collected at those times and places, time-stamped, taken out of circulation, tucked away in these cabinets, and archived for perpetuity. And that resource, that physical specimen and the data that are associated with it, that takes us right back to that very time and place.
Using this time machine, Chris begins searching for past evidence of the disastrous fungus in North American bat populations. Ultraviolet light will reveal if any fungus is present. Swabbing the wings and mouths of bats may pick up trace amounts of fungal DNA.
So by looking for the fungus that causes white nose syndrome and perhaps other related fungi in collections, is learning more about their distribution and learning more about their associations and learning more about their history.
While researchers in the US are trying to understand the origins of the fungus, bat people in Europe are beginning to worry about the epidemic on the other side of the Atlantic.
There was great concern that the fungus would make it to Europe. People were really worried. So we asked around, and nobody expected people to have seen it. But then people came forward and said, "I think we have it here as well."
Wildlife disease expert Dr. Gudrun Wibbelt climbs into abandoned iron ore mines in the Harz Mountains to see if the bat watchers are right.
Das ist eine A103 474.
She finds bats with a fungus that looks just like the North American type. Genetic analysis will later prove it is an identical match. But despite the fungus, the bats here in Europe seem to be healthy.
She's heavy and healthy. This proves they are doing just fine, even with the fungus.
Somehow, these German bats can prevent the fungus from invading their skin. As it turns out, the first documented case of European bats with the fungus occurred in 1984. It seems Europe's bats have nothing to fear from white nose syndrome. This is where it came from.
It was never on anyone's radar screen that you should bleach your cave suit and your bag that you've taken with you. So
a person somehow unknowingly went underground in Europe, whether it was a commercial or a wild cave, and that shoes or the gear that they used at that site came on a plane, came over to the U.S., and they went into a commercial or wild cave in the Albany, New York area at that point source, and just unknowingly transferred a few spores. And it was enough of a loading dose that they had to have brought that those bats were able to start picking up and growing that disease.
And it continues to spread. Little brown bats have nearly disappeared from 6 states. DeeAnn and her students must find out more before it's too late.
we're trying to understand fundamentally what's wrong with these bats. And somewhere in looking at that biology, there may be some aha kind of moments, right? As we really understand what this fungus is doing to these animals, and we understand what they're going to be capable of and not, we may come up with some novel strategies.
A maze of chains presents an obstacle course for the research bats.
Which might be the difference between those white-nosed bats.
A healthy bat wouldn't have any trouble navigating these chains.
She's doing pretty good. Yeah, she is. She's going good.
But it seems that even the affected bats don't find this obstacle course challenging either. DeeAnn also records the echolocation calls of the bats, searching for any abnormality.
It seems really interesting to me when you look at this call that we've just recorded. It appears to be pretty normal. I mean, that's what a little brown typically looks like. And so these animals, both the healthy and affected animals, appear to be having calls that aren't distinguishable from one another.
Dead end. This experiment has not shown any route to fight the epidemic. The ability to fly by echolocation is only one of the legendary achievements of bats that Nickolay is trying to understand. Future Traffic Organization has more in common with bats than one might think. When hundreds of thousands of bats fly in complete darkness, they rely on their sensors to avoid collision. Understanding just how they do it may solve other problems we face.
Recently, there are certain challenges with traffic organization that can benefit from some of the work that we have done with bat groups. And more, it's important to be able to maintain a certain set distance from the vehicle in front of you or around you or behind you. And there are prototype applications where the driver doesn't even steer. It's all maintained by sensors built into the vehicle.
At Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico, bats fly underground for half a mile before they have to rise through a steep opening to reach the open skies. Nick's long-held dream has been to observe how individuals navigate this tunnel with hundreds of thousands of fellow bats at the same time, in complete darkness.
The problem has been that when you shine a light or bring some sorts of light and shine it at the bats, what you see is the response of the colony and the individuals to that light, not what their natural behavior is. We wanted to go around that and come up with a way of recording their behavior in a way that doesn't disturb them, as well as showing us what their natural behavior is.
Thanks to modern technology, they found a way to do so.
We should kill the lights here.
Okay. Thermal imaging shows how the bats fly underground. Like a swarm, they orient themselves with one another by echolocation, and even fly on the right side of the tunnel. Nick and Louise can also observe that bats monitor the density of the traffic below them before they let go of the ceiling. Once they're outside the cave, they form a vortex that allows them to gain height in the most efficient way. The vortex has another advantage for the bats. It allows them to scan the sky for predators outside the cave. Although bats may rule the night sky before the sun is completely set, they're not the only ones who are out to make prey. A red-tailed hawk has specialized on the dawn hunt. While Nick and Louise are trying to unlock bat mysteries in Texas, Pennsylvania's bats continue to die.
You know, we have bats here behind the shutters. They love these old shutters on old homes. And, you know, we'd sit out in the garden in the evening at dusk and just to watch them come out. And it was wonderful. And I sat out the other night until it was pitch black, just waiting to see maybe there were some. And they're just gone. And it's just sad.
To stem the tide of mass mortalities, DeeAnn decides to take desperate measures. A fungicide may be the bat's best chance to combat white nose syndrome. She injects it into the skin of the bats. But to see if it works, she also has to give the bats a dose of the deadly fungus.
You know, we're bringing in healthy animals and we're giving them the fungus. We're giving them a death sentence. And we do that with a heavy heart. We do it because we think it is critically important.
DeeAnn puts the test bats in hibernation. After 2 months, she checks to see if the fungicide has worked.
Well, I have E. We've switched orders a little bit. First guy is TR016 is dead. Okay, we have at least one dead. TR013 is dead. Okay, I have TR015 who is alive and well.
DeeAnn and her team worked fast to collect the data they need and return the bats to hibernation. They weigh the bats and sample wing tissue to see if the fungus is present under the skin. Each bat is then photographed and examined under UV light to search for fungal spores. Relief. The surviving bats seem to be unaffected by the fungus. Others didn't make it, but they did not die in vain.
We utilize every part of the tissue and wing and blood and everything that we can to get as much information as we can, knowing that or, you know, at least firmly hoping that we're going to learn something that is really worth that cost that we're paying.
It may be possible to protect a small population using fungicide. In spring, bats emerge from hibernation and leave their caves to move to their summer homes. Greg and his team set up camp at what used to be one of the largest colonies in Pennsylvania, equipped with something called a harp trap.
And there's a first plane and a second plane, and they're 3 inches apart, 4 inches apart in between. And what happens is the bat will fly, it'll pick up these strings in front, it'll close its wings and fly right through that 1 inch gap, open up its wings for the next wing beat and hit the back and get caught. And that's lost its momentum and it'll flutter all the way down into a catch bag at the bottom, which we're going to put on.
The cave itself is inaccessible due to loose debris, but there may be survivors inside.
Right now, I'm hopeful that this site maybe contains about 1,000 bats total. And given the fact that they're going to emerge over a 3 to 4 week period, it would probably be a good catch to catch 20, maybe 30 bats.
All they can do now is wait and hope. And eventually they appear, survivors. Greg and his team are looking for females. Bats mate in fall, but the females store the sperm over the entire winter. Only in spring do they decide to fertilize their egg and become pregnant.
Female. So she's in the process of fertilizing her egg tonight. If she has viable sperm in her, that is, which we assume she will.
She's a survivor. Yep, she's been exposed. There's some damage here, but nothing all that significant. It's in pretty good shape.
UV light reveals fungus on the bat's wings, yet she's made it through the winter. She may carry a resistance to the fungus in her genes. Greg and his team want to make sure she and the other survivors live through the summer and get a chance to pass on their resistance to their offspring. But to do so, they have to know where she spends her summer and raises her pup. Easier said than done. The first step is to attach a tiny radio transmitter to the bat. These bats weigh between 5 and 8 grams, and the transmitter never weighs more than 1/10 of the bat's body weight. All they have to do now is keep track of the bat.
So, I was figuring, have someone running this road.
4 people will spread out, try to pick up the bat's radio signal, and follow her to the maternity colony.
And we've got Rich over here.
Before takeoff, a little mealworm for the journey.
There we go.
Cal, when you let that bat go, did you get a good direction on it?
Okay, she seems to be moving out pretty quick, heading north.
I had a spot that was to the east of Glen Lyon and kind of overlooked the Correctional Institute.
I'm getting it at 168.
I'm getting a double beep now.
I'm headed towards Newport Center. These guys can fly about 35 miles an hour. So when they jump up and over a ridge where there's no roads, they can blow us away really quick.
Well, I'm turning around because I think I got another beep down the road a bit, but I have to go back to check.
Kevin Lee, does anybody have that bat yet?
I just haven't heard it in about 5-10 minutes.
Cal, I'm at Newport Center. I have nothing up here.
Hey, this is Cal. Does anybody have the bat anymore?
I think maybe I've lost that bat.
I've completely lost her.
Okay. Well, it's 4 in the morning. I think the work's going to be done tomorrow.
Luckily, Greg has a plan B. The next morning, they begin an aerial search grid where the bat was last heard. It doesn't take long.
Hey, Cal, you got me?
Hey, Greg, yes, 10-4, I copy you.
Cal, we found her. She's down here right off the river, right around Hunlock Creek there.
Copy that. That puts her basically right in North Mahopany.
The scary thing is that some of these colonies that had 4,000 or 5,000 females are now down into single digits this year. And so that's what we're out there right now actively surveying these sites, and there's just hardly any bats left.
Nearly 50 miles away from the bat's wintering grounds, Greg has found the place she's chosen to raise her offspring. Hopefully, her presence won't cause any trouble for the owners.
Hi, how you doing? Hi. My name's Greg Turner. I work with the Game Commission. Okay. We're doing a project for you. Well, one of the reasons we're doing this study is because a lot of the bats are dying from a disease that came from Europe. And there's just a few survivors left out there. And so what we're trying to do is follow them and find out where they go. Is there any chance maybe we could walk around and try and find where they're at? And...
Yeah, sure.
All right, great.
Now I'll show you where they're at.
All right, that'd be great.
As in many places, the bats are already causing problems.
Back here in the men's restroom, we have some stained ceiling tile, and when we moved the tile, we got all the droppings coming down. And if you want to take a look above there.
The owner was planning to take action against the bats this year. He had no idea his house is a refuge for survivors of a wildlife crisis. Bats love the crevices of old wooden roofs. They offer protection from predators, as well as curious wildlife managers. But Greg seems to get lucky.
This is a male big brown bat. So very interesting. Usually you don't have males in a maternity colony. Males are usually a lot more solitary, so they're usually just hanging around, you know, in low numbers by themselves, you know, singly, or maybe 5, 10 bats. So the females are probably all congregated somewhere else.
The church has become a safe haven for bats. But Greg needs to solve the problems that causes. His best option is a bat box. Installed right next to where the bats have been entering the attic. Greg hopes they'll move into the box instead of the church bathroom. He'll be back to check on their progress.
One of the things that I think is going to be increasingly important is that every bat that's left in the areas where white nose has moved through is conserved in order to ensure the survival of those animals that are left remaining, to give them the best chance to be our founding population.
As the summer days lengthen, bat boxes around the Northeast welcome newborn pups. Most bats have just one offspring a year, so the overall population won't recover quickly. But babies of little brown bats that survive white nose syndrome could offer valuable insight into how and why so many bats are dying. DeeAnn keeps a close eye on the little brown bat survivors and finds comfort and motivation in the survival rates of other bat species.
This part of the barn is where the big brown bats have typically lived, and we see that there's still a really nice, viable colony of them in here. Right now we've got lactating females and their pups.
In all the havoc that white nose syndrome has created, big brown bats have somehow managed to hang on.
Those pups are pretty big when they're born, and within 3-4 weeks or so, or 5 weeks, they can actually start to fly and are fully furred, and they have a lot of work to do. They've got a lot of body fat to try to put on before their first winter in order to survive that winter. So they have a challenging year ahead of them. So it's in their best interest to get out there, learn to feed, learn to fly as quickly as possible. It's just great to see healthy bats and bats flying around. It's like I'm so used to finding the bats absent. And you see a single bat and you say, you know, go, go, go. No, he's coming back. pups that we've had our hands on tonight look beautiful. They're in great health, and it's really nice to see animals in good shape after seeing so many animals that are affected by this disease.
In just a few short years, millions of bats have died, and millions more are threatened if something doesn't stop the killer's progress. But DeeAnn and others continue efforts to understand and stop the spread of white nose syndrome and to support the survivors.
You know, maybe we'll never see the 100,000 million bats in one site again in this area, but maybe we'll get a few thousand here and there, and you know, maybe they will rebound to where they once were. Hopefully they will.